The most important aspect for me was learning how to relax and let go of my own agenda for what I thought play was supposed to be, what it was supposed to look like, what I was supposed to teach.
So, Andrew, one of the things that parents of autistic children often struggle with is how to play effectively with their children, because autistic children don't respond to the stimulus of play in the way that non-autistic children do. So parents often find it difficult to get into a relationship of play with their children. And if you don't have that relationship of play with your children, it's a whole dimension of the relationship that's missing. So what could you say to help parents to be able to find that ability to play with their autistic children in a way that makes the children feel engaged?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and I think a really important one. I mean, I would say always the starting point, and I'll also go back a lot and use my own experience over the years as a neurotypical professional, really having learned a tremendous amount about exactly what you described about how to play with autistic children, autistic people. And I think the biggest, the most important, the most important aspect for me was learning how to relax and let go of my own agenda for what I thought play was supposed to be, what it was supposed to look like, what I was supposed to teach, or how I was supposed to make something happen, right? In terms of an interaction with a child. I think that is, I think it was for me, and I think for many, especially neurotypical people, that can be incredibly difficult to show up with another human being, whether it's your child or a child that you're working with or anybody else, to just show up in a way that is not attached to whatever's going to unfold. I'm just going to show up, be present, and sort of tune into this person and really let whatever's going to unfold. So that's what I would always say is an important starting point in play.
I think that could cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of parents, because they could very easily not feel comfortable with that, because that's not generally what happens in daily life that they're used to. And it might even touch on a fear that they don't know how to play with their child, and they don't quite know what they need to do what you're saying, to just be with the child. What does that mean in practical terms for a parent?
Yeah, I think you're onto some very important things, Guy, that I think it's true that it can cause, parents can feel tremendous anxiety about just being with and trying to connect with their child without an agenda. And I think that I really think this is almost a much deeper issue and question that I think in society in general. I think we live in societies that don't encourage us to do just that. We live in societies that are pushing us and driving us to achieve, to do, to make things happen, to be going at a certain pace. And so most of us don't get much training at all in how to just show up and be with and be present with another person. I think we all started there in many ways as young people. Children tend to be much better at this than adults. Um, but I think that this can cause tremendous anxiety for parents. And I think what I was forced to do, and this training for me a lot happened at when I was working at the Sunrise program, because I was in a playroom environment for many hours a day, every day with a child. And I had to learn how to get very comfortable, really tuning into that child and watching what they were doing, watching what they were interested, watching their communication signals very, very closely, and letting go of my own sort of, pre-established set of goals. And that was really wonderful and powerful training. And I think that was also the same experience, similar experience for parents. They also got that kind of opportunity to learn how to just slow down and slow themselves down and just really show up and be present with their children. And most parents had not had any encouragement or sort of formal training to do that.
We learnt this when we went to the Mifni Center with our son, the Mifni Center in Israel, and it took them a long time. We were there for 3 weeks. It took them probably, as I remember, for the first week, there wasn't really much interaction with our son. It took them a long time of just being with him and continually, very gently having an open invitation. It's not like continually inviting him because that's pressure, but having that open invitation and being there with that openness to interact with him. Maybe, what we learned to do as well was to even do some activities by ourselves, which we know he likes to do, and just keep looking up at him, just to let him know that we're there with him and he can come and join us. And eventually he did. And if we chose activities that were really fun, like if we were reading a funny story to ourselves, he would actually be so curious he'd come up and start playing with us. But it's other times, we were there for a long time without any interaction. And as you say, it was about letting go of our expectations. As parents, we, like every other parent, had expectations of, the type of relationship we wanted with our child. And there's worry and anxiety if that type of relationship wasn't possible, and then it projected into all sorts of fears about the future. But actually, if we bring that anxiety and that fear into a room with him, where we're there to interact with him, what's going to happen? He's going to absorb that fear. His experience of playing with us is going to be a fearful experience because he'll pick up on the fear that we have. So we had to learn to put that to the side and just be with him without an agenda, without any expectation, with an open, loving invitation. And that's it.
Wow. That is, I think you've just described the path in many ways for parents so perfectly. I mean, that is, as you described it, that was not so easy to just immediately jump into, because you had expectations, you had hopes, you had ideas formed in your mind of how this was supposed to go with your son. And what an incredible opportunity you had to be able to really slow down. And I think I want to go back to the way you framed it in terms of just giving yourself permission and being given permission from that the staff and that environment to have fun yourself in the presence of your son. So in other words, you would read the whole idea that I think many parents listening to this might be like, that's completely crazy. Why would I read a book to myself? But I've had the same experience over and over again over the years of really learning how to sit with a book with an autistic child or young person, and literally, I'm using a pretend book here, but like literally reading a story to myself, and like just really giving myself the permission to read the story and have that experience. And what, as soon as I genuinely did that, my experience was that all of a sudden the child I was with would come immediately towards me, would begin to look at me and be very interested in what I was doing,
Yeah.
because there was no pressure.
Yeah.
There was no pressure on them to respond in a certain way or do anything. It was, I was just having a great time myself.
Yeah.
And it was so appealing to them to
Yeah.
want to join in and be a part of that. And I think what we're continuing to learn and hear from autistic people, is that is critical. Having like a warm and open invitation to interact versus this pressure, where a parent or a therapist is pulling
Yeah.
or forcing an autistic child into an interaction. So I think that's really powerful, Guy. What you shared. I'd love to know more about what that experience was like for you, and the impact it had on your son over time.
Well, the impact it had initially was that he started to reconnect with us.
Mm,
Um, we were very lucky that we had this opportunity when he was 2 to learn all of this stuff. Um, and at that time, for months we hadn't had more than a quarter of a second of eye contact with him. At any point, it was almost as if he didn't. It just felt like he wasn't interested in communicating with us. But of course, he was. Um, and when we made the environment safe for him in this way, then he responded, which gave us a lot of, and it didn't happen immediately. There's a lot of, I recounted some magical moments. There were a lot of moments that weren't magical, and we had to be fine with that, because if we weren't fine with that, we were not accepting him as he was, and he wouldn't feel safe to join us. And there were times when there were the sorts of play, he might be at that time lining up things, putting things in a big line where other children would be sort of having making characters of the little animals or soldiers. He'd be just lining them in a line, and we might not have felt comfortable with that at the time, but we joined in with that as well. And very, very gently, we didn't force ourselves in. We very gently offered to join him. And there was actually a really nice moment where he was just rolling a car round and round and round and round a track. And I sat with him, and I just joined him, and it was almost as if he didn't acknowledge my presence, but I did the same as him. I rolled that car around the same track along with his car, and it was like we were playing independently. And at the end of it, or it was actually some hours later, he came to me and he said, "You played with me with the yellow car." So it's like it had meant a lot to him, and you don't see these signs in the moment, but it's he happened to express that to me. There may have been hundreds of times when he didn't express that to us when we were playing with him. So it almost shows that it is so important for the child. It gives them so much in terms of affirmation and in terms of closeness with a parent, that just because we don't see the results so quickly, we're used to seeing instant results. We're used to playing with children who are not autistic. You tell a joke, that child smiles and laughs. You pull a funny face, that child is putty in your hands. With an autistic child, it's not always like that. We need to offer our play without any attachment to having an instant result. And it's difficult because we can never know. We can never be sure that we've got it right. But we do our best, and we do it with an attitude of an open heart to our child, and without bringing all our fears into the play with him. And that gives it the very best chance of success.
Yes, yes, yes. That, for me, Guy, that really, that speaks so beautifully to, I think, what can feel like the greatest challenge and the greatest fear for parents is um, deciding to trust in exactly what you just described, deciding to trust that if I just allow myself to be with my child, perhaps even play alongside of them without kind of pushing for this kind of back and forth joint play. But if I'm just, again, as you described with the car, you're literally playing alongside of, or across the room from, or in parallel with um, your child. What I think can be so difficult to trust is that that's actually the pathway to more establishing more interactive play.
Yeah.
And I think parents get so afraid and scared that the connection won't happen, and that the play will just go on and on, without a response from their child. And I think in your case, and I think also in my case, in terms of my own training, I had to get encouragement to believe that each child wanted to connect with me and really wanted to be with me and wanted to play with me, because sometimes it was hard to see, as you described. Yeah. And I think that's in all of the work I do with families, that's always the reassurance that I keep trying to give to parents is, your child wants to be with you. They want to play with you. They want to connect with you. We know that. We've never been clearer that that's true, because now so many brave, brilliant, wonderful autistic people are sharing their experience and their stories with the world. And we know autistic people, just like neurotypical people, want to connect, want to be close, want to have relationships and contact. But we have to be able to set the conditions up for I think for children and adults to connect with each other in some new ways.
Did you find, because we did, I mean, have you found with the families and the children you work with that over time, if you put in this patience at the beginning, over time, the relationship is more immediate. The responses do come much more quickly and or in the moment very often?
I would say 100% of the time, yes. And I think the challenge is that, and this might be a bit different in the UK versus in the US. The challenge is, and I think the problem is, we have an entire system of care, and in many ways an entire model that gives parents the message that the harder you push, the more results you get. The harder you push and the more you force and the more you kind of, sort of break your child of their autism, that's sort of the only way forward. That's the only way to kind of to connect and to teach and to train. And I think that is causing enormous damage to parent-child relationships. And it's from my perspective, it's based on, it makes sense because it's based on an entire system and society that forces human beings into that model of this is how we have to be with each other.
Strong and successful people need to take the bull by the horns, sort out any problem, keep at it until it's solved, otherwise they're a failure. That sort of mentality.
Exactly, Guy. And what's been so interesting about the last 2.5 years in terms of what's happening in our societies and globally with the pandemic and everything else is we're finally now, more and more people are beginning to see that this is not a sustainable path for human flourishing or for the planet's survival.
Yeah.
We have to change how we are with each other. And I will go back to this and say this, that for me, one of the greatest gifts and the reason why I do what I do and what gets me excited to wake up in the morning is that learning how to be with autistic people and learning how to do what I'm describing, and as a neurotypical person, learning how to let go of my agenda and just be present, and tune into another person and relax and calm down and just let whatever's going to unfold. Those are gifts. The ability to do those things were gifts that I received from autistic people that I now bring into my every interaction with people in general. And I think that is what we're missing tremendously in terms of this whole model that I think needs to shift. I think neurotypical people need to begin to recognize how much I will, as a neurotypical person, learn from an autistic person about how to interact and how to just be with another person. So I'm learning as much as a neurotypical person from autistic people in play as an autistic person might learn from me. And there is a reciprocity and an equal sharing that I think neurotypical people need to begin to recognize. And that's what I'm hoping for.